Hi, so this first screencast is a very, very simple animation from a graphic, an illustration rather than a photo or video. And it's designed just to sort of demonstrate for you basic construction of a GIF. And what I'm especially interested in, that you pay attention to the layers panel on the right and the layers panel on the far right will pop up as soon as you open Photoshop. It's kind of this default settings. But also what I want you to pay attention to is the relationship between it and the timeline. And you'll have to open the timeline yourself, at least the first time that you use it in Photoshop. This is Photoshop Creative Cloud if you've got Photoshop 5 extended, or in some cases even earlier versions, or Photoshop 6. Rather than timeline, it may say animation, and you may get a couple choices in what animation you wished, or what timeline you wish to set up. You want to create a frame animation, and I know this is kind of small in the window, but this says create frame animation. So I'm going to click on that. And what it's done basically is copied this frame into the timeline. And this timeline will function, as you'll see as we add more frames, like a timeline in any video program. So what I'm going to do is build a very, very simple GIF that demonstrates this rocket. And I'm going to select it and copy it into my animation, taking off, going from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. So I'm going to place this down here, right? And I'm going to create another layer. And I'm going to add another rocket to that layer. And I'm going to place it here. And I'm going to create a third layer. And I'm going to place the rocket here. And for the fourth layer, I'm going to do the same process essentially, but a little differently because I want to illustrate something while we're here. Cut and paste works fine because I don't need to resize. I don't need to fine tune or adjust the positioning of any of these rockets. They're just going from bottom to top. But in the event you want to manage placement of components in a GIF, you may choose to place embed. So I'm going to select the same rocket from the folder using this. And you can see it now has the frame, which would allow me to, if I wished, I could adjust the position, even the size and dimensions of the rocket. So if I wanted the rocket to fly around in circles within the frame, I would want to use this. In the next video, where there are several interlaced and moving cogs, it was using this place embed that allowed me to give the animation that behavior. So I just wanted to demonstrate that here. So I'm going to hit return, so it's placed. Now I've got 4 layers, each with a different kind of positioning animation. I can turn them off and you can see, and you can kind of see where this is going. All right, now is the next step between sort of the relationship between the layers and the timeline. I'm going to go to this, again, very, very small window, and I'm going to say make frames from layers. And it's going to take those 3 remaining layers and it's going to put them in the timeline. And I can click through each of those here, and they'll display. And you can begin to get a sense of the behavior that this very simple graphic is going to have. There are some features here that you should be aware of. Number one, you can adjust the time that each individual frame displays. If you select all the frames, it will change that time for each of the frames to be the same, or you can select them individually. And for a variety of aesthetic reasons, you may want to do one or the other. The default is for this graphic, and now I can hit play in the timeline, and it'll go up once. The default is for it to play once, but the whole purpose of most GIFs is that it should loop. So I'm going to tell it to loop forever. You can tell it how many times you want to play, and if you look at some of the example files, more sophisticated applications, particularly sometimes advertising applications, they recognize that GIFs that loop continuously can be really irritating. So they'll just have the GIF loop once, twice, maybe 3 times, so that they know the viewer has gotten the totality of the content, but they're not sort of watching this sort of very distracting and annoying bell and whistle. So essentially now, if I play my GIF, that's it. That is fundamentally how you create a GIF in Photoshop. In the remaining lessons, we'll get perpetually more complex, and you can see sort of how you can add on to this basic functionality. The next step is to export your GIF. And I'm going to go here to File and down to Save for Web. And I'm going to get this window. And it's going to, most of the options here really are not relevant for the purposes of what we're doing in this video. But there are some notable things. If you are really want to be economical about the size, you can reduce it literally to the number of colors in a GIF. And this becomes important if you're doing sort of line art or screen graphics. You can decide some choices about how exactly it will play. And there are a variety of other features here. The one important one is that it will allow you basically to preview your GIF in your default browser, which is always a good idea because Photoshop can be a little kludgy in how it manages GIFs and animations. So you just want to play it before you export it and make sure it works. So I'm going back to Photoshop, and I'm going to save this GIF. Save to my desktop. I'm going to call it test. And now, just to demonstrate that it actually plays, I'm going to play my GIF. And all I have to do is drag it into my browser and it will play. I want to show you one more thing about this GIF, which is kind of interesting. And this will be true of any GIF. If I, instead of in Photoshop, but open it up in any preview window, preview windows can't manage GIFs. So what it's going to do is show me in this GIF each of the 4 layered files that make up the GIF. So a lot of times I think if you're interested in how more complex GIFs are put together and how the layers are worked, assuming you can download them, you can open them in a preview browser, in a preview program, and see the individual frames and how they're constructed. That's it for our first lesson.